The rain fell relentlessly over Blackthorn Manor. Water streamed down cracked stone walls that had once symbolized wealth and prestige. The estate stood atop a lonely hill, battered by years of neglect and misfortune. Inside, Miss Clara Blackthorn struggled to keep a bucket beneath another leak in the ceiling. The bucket joined 6 others already scattered throughout the drawing room. She sighed. 3 years ago, Blackthorn Manor had been one of the finest estates in the county. 3 years ago, her father had still been alive. 3 years ago, creditors had not been circling like vultures. Now the roof leaked. The servants were gone. The horses had been sold. And every week brought another threatening letter. A loud knock suddenly echoed through the house. Clara froze. Another creditor. Wonderful. She set down the bucket and crossed the hall. The knocking came again. Firm. Authoritative. The sort of knock that expected obedience. When she opened the door, her breath caught. A tall man stood beneath the rain. Behind him waited 4 mounted riders. Their black cloaks whipped in the wind. The stranger removed his gloves slowly. He was handsome in a way that almost seemed unfair. Dark hair, sharp jaw, piercing blue eyes. Everything about him radiated confidence and power. Clara immediately knew he was nobility. The expensive coat alone probably cost more than her yearly household budget. The stranger studied her. Not the house. Not the ruined doorway. Her. For several uncomfortable seconds. "May I help you?" Clara finally asked. The man raised an eyebrow. "You are not a servant." "There are no servants." His gaze sharpened. "I see." A strange silence followed. Then he spoke. "I am Duke Sebastian Ashford." Clara nearly forgot how to breathe. The Duke of Ashford. One of the wealthiest men in the kingdom. The owner of nearly half the surrounding county. The man whose name appeared on every debt notice sent to the manor. Oh, this was bad. Very bad. The Duke's expression remained unreadable. "Miss Clara Blackthorn?" "Yes. I have come regarding the Blackthorn debt." There it was. The sentence she had dreaded for months. Clara straightened her shoulders. "Then you should come inside." The Duke seemed mildly surprised. Most people apparently trembled in his presence. Clara was too exhausted to bother. He followed her into the drawing room. One glance revealed everything. The leaking roof. The worn furniture. The cold fireplace. The absence of servants. The Duke said nothing. Yet Clara could practically feel him assessing every detail. Finally, he turned toward her. "The debt currently stands at £22,000. She already knew. Every painful penny. They cannot be repaid." Direct honesty seemed easier. The Duke nodded. "I suspected as much." His calm response somehow made things worse. Clara clasped her hands tightly. "What happens now?" The Duke walked toward a rain-streaked window. "Your father borrowed heavily." "Yes." "He repeatedly refinanced the estate." "Yes." "He ignored multiple warnings." Clara looked away. "Yes." The Duke turned back. "The debt agreement gives me ownership of Blackthorn Manor." The words landed exactly as she expected, like an executioner's blade. Yet hearing them aloud still hurt. This house contained every memory she had. Every memory of her parents. Every memory of her childhood. Soon it would belong to someone else. The Duke watched her carefully, perhaps expecting tears, or pleading, or anger. Instead, Clara simply asked, "When must I leave?" For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his face. "You are accepting this rather quickly." "There is nothing to argue." Her voice remained steady. "I cannot pay." The Duke studied her. Longer this time. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though something about her response puzzled him. Before he could answer, a voice suddenly shouted from outside. "Miss Blackthorn." Clara grimaced. "Not now." The front door burst open. A stout man rushed inside without invitation. Mr. Holloway, the local merchant. Unfortunately, his gaze landed on Clara, then the Duke, then back to Clara. His face immediately brightened. "Excellent. You found a buyer." "No." "Wonderful." "No." The merchant ignored her completely. "The manor is worth restoring. Excellent land. Fine location." The Duke's expression darkened. "I am not purchasing the estate." "You're collecting the debt?" The merchant winced. "Oh." Silence filled the room. Then, apparently deciding dignity was unnecessary, Mr. Holloway blurted, "That's unfortunate." Clara closed her eyes. "Please stop talking." Mr. Holloway did not stop talking. In fairness, everyone expected this eventually. The Duke folded his arms. Expected what? The poor girl losing everything. Clara wanted the floor to swallow her. Instead, the merchant continued enthusiastically. No family, no fortune, no prospects. Mr. Holloway. And now nowhere to go. Please stop. The merchant finally noticed her expression. Oh, he cleared his throat awkwardly, then hurried toward the door. Well, another awkward pause. I'll leave. A third awkward pause. Good day. He fled. The front door slammed shut. Silence returned. Clara considered following him and pushing him into the nearest river. The Duke looked strangely thoughtful. No prospects, he asked. She groaned softly. Please ignore him. Is he wrong? Mostly. The Duke leaned against the table. Mostly. Clara hesitated. There was little point hiding the truth. My father died with considerable debts. The Duke nodded. I gathered that. My mother passed away shortly afterward. Something flickered in his eyes. Sympathy, perhaps. I am sorry. The simple sincerity surprised her. Thank you. Do you have relatives? A few. Who will help? She laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it wasn't. The Duke immediately understood. I see. For some reason, that bothered him. Clara could tell. His expression grew increasingly distant. Thoughtful. As though he were solving some internal puzzle. Finally he spoke. Tell me something. What? If you knew the estate was doomed. His gaze held hers. Why remain here? The answer came easily. Because it was the truth. Someone had to fight for it. The Duke said nothing. Clara continued quietly. I knew I would probably lose. She glanced around the room. But I couldn't abandon it. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The Duke stared at her. Really stared. Not as a creditor. Not as a duke. Not as a powerful man assessing a financial asset. As though he were seeing her for the first time. A strange expression crossed his face. One she couldn't identify. Then one of his riders suddenly entered. Your Grace. The Duke looked away. What is it? The documents. The rider handed him a leather folder. The Duke opened it. Read briefly. Then became very still. His eyes moved across a particular page. Once. Twice. Then a third time. Something had changed. Clara could feel it. The Duke slowly raised his gaze toward her. His expression was completely different now. Almost disbelieving. What is it? She asked. He closed the folder. For several seconds, he simply looked at her. Then he spoke, and the words changed everything. Miss Blackthorne. His voice had become unexpectedly careful. I believe there is something your father never told you. Clara's heart began to pound. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. And for the first time since arriving, the Duke of Ashford looked less like a man collecting a debt, and more like a man who had just discovered one. Clara stared at him. What do you mean? The Duke remained silent for a moment. Then he opened the folder again. Rain continued tapping against the windows. The room suddenly felt much smaller. 24 years ago, he said carefully, your father signed more than a loan agreement. Clara frowned. What does that mean? The Duke removed a yellow document. Its edges were worn with age. This was included with the original debt contract. She stepped closer. What is it? The Duke hesitated, as though choosing his words. Then he handed it to her. Clara read the first few lines. And froze. The document wasn't a financial agreement. It was a marriage contract. Her hands trembled. What? The Duke's expression was grim. Apparently, your father and mine were close friends. She looked up. I don't understand. Neither did I. The Duke took a slow breath. According to this document, if the debt could not be repaid, his jaw tightened. The Blackthorne daughter would enter the Ashford household under a marriage agreement. The room went silent. Clara blinked, then blinked again. Surely she had misunderstood. Marriage? Yes. To whom? The Duke gave her a look. Oh, no, absolutely not. Her face turned bright red. That's absurd. I agree. It cannot possibly be legal. Probably not. Probably. The Duke rubbed his forehead. Contracts written by aristocrats 24 years ago were often creative. Clara dropped into a chair. This was madness. Complete madness. The Duke himself looked equally disturbed. Fortunately, he said, I have no intention of enforcing it. Relief flooded through her. Thank goodness. Then he added, the debt remains valid. However, the relief disappeared. Right. The debt. The reason he was here. The reason she was losing everything. The Duke closed the folder. I will not force a marriage. Good. But I still own the estate. Less good. To her surprise, he laughed. A genuine laugh. For a moment neither felt quite so miserable. Then reality returned. Clara stared into the fireplace. So that's it. The Duke watched her. What is? I leave. His expression darkened slightly. You make it sound simple. It isn't. Her voice softened. But it is reality. The Duke looked around the room. At the leaking ceiling. The worn furniture. The lonely house she had fought so hard to save. Then he looked back at her. And something about her quiet acceptance bothered him more than it should have. 3 days later, Clara began packing. There wasn't much left to pack. Most valuables had been sold years ago. A few books. Some clothes. Family photographs. Memories. The hardest things to carry. A carriage arrived unexpectedly that afternoon. Clara assumed it belonged to another creditor. Instead, the Duke of Ashford stepped out. She frowned. What are you doing here? I wish to show you something. What? Come with me. Suspiciously, she followed. An hour later they arrived at the far edge of the Blackthorn estate. A neglected valley stretched before them. Overgrown fields. Collapsed fences. Abandoned buildings. Clara frowned. I know this land. The Duke nodded. Do you? Of course. It belonged to your grandfather. Before it became worthless. The Duke smiled slightly. That is where you are mistaken. He handed her several papers. Clara read quickly. Then read again. And again. Her eyes widened. The land wasn't worthless. Not even close. A recently completed survey had discovered valuable clay deposits beneath the valley. Extremely valuable clay deposits. The kind used by major pottery manufacturers. The kind worth fortunes. Clara stared at him. This is real. Very. Her heart raced. But why was nobody told? The survey was completed only recently. The Duke's eyes met hers. I commissioned it myself. Understanding slowly dawned. He hadn't come merely to collect a debt. He had investigated the estate. Every part of it. Every possibility. Every chance to save it. For her. Sebastian. It was the first time she had spoken his name. The Duke visibly noticed. So the estate can be saved? She asked. More than saved. His smile grew. It can thrive. For several seconds Clara simply stared at the valley. Then tears filled her eyes. Not tears of sadness. Relief. Hope. The sort of hope she had not felt in years. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him. The Duke caught her immediately. Neither seemed eager to let go. Eventually Clara pulled back. Slightly embarrassed. The Duke looked anything but embarrassed. In fact, he seemed remarkably pleased. You realize, she said softly, that most men would have taken the estate and left. I know. Why didn't you? The Duke was quiet. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he answered honestly. Because somewhere between collecting a debt and discovering an impossible marriage contract. His gaze softened. I fell in love with the woman who answered the door. Clara forgot how to breathe. The wind stirred gently around them. Neither moved. Neither looked away. The Duke stepped closer. Clara. Her pulse thundered. Yes. I don't care about the contract. Good. I don't care about the debt. Even better. His smile appeared. I only care about one thing. She already knew. But she wanted to hear it anyway. What? The Duke took her hand. Will you marry me because you choose to? Tears returned immediately. This time she didn't try to stop them. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. The Duke kissed her forehead. Then her hand. Then finally pulled her into his arms once more. Months later, their wedding became the talk of the kingdom. Not because a duke had married. Dukes married all the time. People talked because of the story. The story of a nobleman arriving to collect a debt. The story of a ruined estate. The story of a forgotten contract. And the story of a young woman who had opened a door expecting to lose everything. Instead, she found a future. Years later, whenever guests visited Blackthorn Manor, fully restored and thriving once again, they often asked the Duke the same question. Is it true you came here to collect a debt? The Duke would smile, then glance toward Clara, his wife, the love of his life, and his favorite answer never changed. Yes. A pause, then a grin. And the girl who answered the door turned out to be the only thing worth collecting.